Hi, welcome back to your video lecture series, continuing with chapters 2 through 6. And this time we're going to be looking at religious beliefs, religions of the ancient world. And here we see one of the more famous religions, which is that of the Egyptians. And here we see, this is one of their gods, taking one of the bodies of the pharaohs to the afterlife. Now, religion, there's two major divisions. We have the polytheistic religions who believe in many gods or deities. And then we have monotheistic beliefs, religions that believe in one singular God. Now, polytheistic is the most common one of the ancient world. We find it all over the world. Mesopotamians, Egyptians, Chinese people, Indians, Native Americans, Africans, all of these people were polytheistic, right? And the kind of more famous ones being the Greeks and the Romans. And even to this day, there's some parts around the world, like in Africa and India, where polytheism is still a major, or is their religious belief. So here we see something that these would be the Greek deities or the Greek gods. Notice how many of them are, have both human and animal features. These would be some of these are the Mesopotamian gods. Okay. And what we see is there's a lot of kind of like similar patterns between polytheistic religions. For one thing, we see ancestral veneration being a major part, meaning that you're honoring your ancestors because your ancestor spirits who live in the spiritual world can provide assistance or can call the gods to help you on your behalf. We see the belief in a spirit world, right? There's this physical world that you and I live in, but there's also another spiritual world that coexists with us, and that spirits and the gods that live in that world can negatively or positively affect people in the physical world. A lot of the natural forces like thunders and earthquakes and flooding, right? Those are actions that the gods take, right? So if your house gets flooded, then clearly, you know, a god was upset at you. Or if an earthquake destroys your village, then that is punishment from the gods. We also see priesthoods working with political leaders, right? So the religious leaders. Remember, many times religious leaders, political leaders were also religious leaders, like priest kings and pharaohs, right? They claim to be divinely chosen, or they claim to be representatives of God or the gods, I should say. We also see priestesses, right? So women played a role in the priesthood and some type of sacrifice. And throughout most of the world, sacrifice normally meant of animals, right? So they'll sacrifice a goat or a sheep, lambs, that sort of stuff. Basically, mainly only in Mesoamerica, right, in Mexico, do we see any type of human sacrifice. Now, monotheism, belief in one God, we see it form with Judaism, and it begins here in the middle. It begins in the Middle East. And Judaism is the first kind of religion to believe that there is one God who created everything, is all knowing, all powerful. And you don't pray, there aren't any other gods, just one God. And that idea of a singular God will eventually, make its way down throughout history. And we'll see the other two religions, Christianity and Islam, who are also monotheistic, be formed later on in history. And in fact, these two religions are the two largest religions on earth. All right, we're going to focus on the two ancient religions. Right, so these are religions that were created back in time period one, right, which is before 600 BCE. The first religion is what we call the Vedic religion, and nowadays is known as Hinduism. And the Vedic religion came with the Aryans. Remember, the Aryans were these people from Central Asia who migrated over hundreds and hundreds of years throughout the South Asian continent, or the South Asian region. And these people brought their religious beliefs with them. And originally, their religious beliefs were orally passed down, right? They were told in stories and poems and epics and songs, and they were passed down, about gods and heroes and monsters and demons. But eventually, once they settled down in India, they started to write these down, right? And these became known as the Vedas. And the Vedas are kind of like the most important religious texts for these people. And the language that they wrote it in is called Sanskrit. And basically, the main thing about the Vedas is that it tells us that there's a group of humans, group of people called the Brahmin, who are the priests, who's responsible for communicating with the gods and honoring those, the gods, and they have hundreds and hundreds of different type of gods. So this is the birth of the Vedic religion, right? And we see, some of the early drawings here, and the Vedic religion kind of mixes and matches Aryan and Dravidian or Indus Valley peoples' religious beliefs, and kind of combines those two together. There's another book, another major text, religious text called the Upanishads, and this one kind of lays out what is proper behavior. And basically, proper behavior includes the ideas of dharma and karma, right? And these would be the kind of like the major beliefs of Hinduism. All right, so let's talk about Hinduism really quickly. So a Hindu believes that there is one universal supreme God, right, who's called Brahma. It's not a he or it's not she, it's just everything. And everything on earth is part of Brahma. It is part of creation. It's eternal. And right, so it's kind of like a visualization of what Brahma looks like. And that means that Brahma, like Brahma is kind of like divides itself into endless uh, manifestations, endless parts, right? So they have, the Hindus believe in hundreds and hundreds of different gods, but all those gods are just one tiny, tiny little part of what is the ultimate, eternal God, the supreme God of Brahma. And every living thing on earth is Brahma as well, right? Because every living thing has a soul, and that soul is part of that eternal energy, eternal God of Brahma. And they believe that when the soul dies, right, or sorry, when the body dies, the soul reincarnates, right? It comes back into another life, into another body. And this would call the cycle of reincarnation, right? So you're born, you grow up, you get old, you pass away, right? Your soul reincarnates and starts the process all over again. And so they also believe in the ideas of Dharma. And Dharma says that there are certain rules and certain expectations and certain behavior for every single person on earth. Okay? Everyone in society has a job to do. So, for example, if you're born into the warrior caste, right, the warrior social class, then your job on earth is to be a warrior, to be the best warrior you can. And if you're born into the merchant caste or the merchant caste, your job is to be the best merchant or the best farmer or the best priest or Brahmin that we see up here. Okay? Your job, if you're born a farmer, you cannot want to be a warrior. And if you're a warrior, you cannot hope to be a merchant because that's not what is meant for you. So the Dharma are kind of these rules that everyone has to follow. And this is a way to keep society organized, right? You have the upper classes up here and the lower classes down here. Now, the idea comes that by following your rules, your dharma, right, your soul would accumulate karma with a K, karma, right? So if you are the best farmer you can possibly be, right, your soul is doing what it's supposed to, right? It's following the rules of dharma. So that means that the day you pass away and you reincarnate in the next life, right, you will be rewarded for doing your job. So in the next life, you might move up and be a merchant. And if you do a great job as a merchant, you will move up to be a warrior. And if you do a great job as a warrior, you eventually move up to be the priest, right, which is the highest of all the social class or the case. But if you don't follow the rules, right, if you don't follow Dharma, then your karma will suffer. You would not accumulate. Your soul will be punished when you reincarnate. So you go from upper class to lower class, as a form of punishment, until you learn to follow the rules and whatever it is expected of you. Now, what is the ultimate goal? What's the point of all this? Well, they believe that eventually the soul, once it reaches the Brahmin level, right, the priest level, uh, the soul can finally escape the cycle of reincarnation, reunite with the ultimate God, Brahma, right? And that's it. You have accomplished everything you're supposed to accomplish in this life and any other life before it, right? And this ultimate accomplishment, this ultimate, perfect sense of, completion is what they call moksha, right? So that's the ultimate goal. People who are Hindu, right? That's what they're looking forward to, right? Just like people who are Christians are looking forward into going to heaven. Well, a Hindu looks forward to one day, hopefully, possibly, reincarnate or not reincarnate, but have their soul leave the cycle of reincarnation, leave the physical earth, and reunite with the universe, right? And again, it's all about your caste, right? What your role is, what your responsibilities are, right? It's all about, moving up by accumulating karma. And one thing we need to mention is that the only people who can become priests in Hinduism are men, right? Women cannot be priests, right? So if you're a woman and you're upper class, you can never achieve moksha. You would have to reincarnate as a man, and then you can possibly achieve moksha. All right, the last religion we're going to look at, which is an ancient religion, is that of the Jewish people, which is called Judaism. Now, the Jewish people, they followed this guy, right? His name was Abraham. And Abraham believed that there was a single God called Yahweh, and that he made a deal or a covenant with God, and that Abraham's followers, right, they're called the Israelites or the Hebrews. Nowadays we call them, Jews, but that they were chosen people by God, and they were told to come settle this region, right? And this is the region nowadays we call Israel or Palestine, and Lebanon. But back then, this would have been known as Canaan, and they lived in Mesopotamia, which would be over here somewhere. And they traveled across the desert to come live here, right? The capital being Jerusalem. And they settled down. They and they started praying to their one singular God. So they believed that being the chosen ones, by having this deal with God, that this was land that was promised to them, right? That their kids and their grandkids and their descendants forever and ever will live in this, in this kingdom that was promised by God. We know that some Jewish people, right here we see Canaan, right here's Mesopotamia. Some Jewish people crossed to live in Egypt, and eventually some, the biblical stories say how they were captured and enslaved by the Egyptian pharaohs, and eventually they were freed by Moses, right, and they were returned back to Canaan. They settled down once again and established a kingdom called the Kingdom of Israel, and Jerusalem was their capital. They built a temple, and the king and the priests ruled this kingdom very tightly. A lot of strict laws, a lot of religious laws, and a lot of restrictions on women. Like women couldn't own property, couldn't inherit property, and they couldn't divorce even if their husbands were not, faithful or anything like that. On top of that, they had arranged marriages, so your parents chose who you're going to get married with. So this would be one of, this is a replica of what the temple kind of looked like. And they believe that this was kind of like the house of God. Eventually, we know that Israel splits up, and then they get conquered, and then they get spread out. And what I mean by spread out is that the Jews are forced to leave their homeland, right? So this is the promised land over here. right, what they consider the promised land, the kingdom of Israel, and they are forced to live over here or live up here in Turkey or in Egypt maybe. And then other empires would come to power, like the Romans. They forced the Jews to move further and further away. So we see Jewish people living, in Spain or in France, living up here in North Africa or in Greece or in Italy, uh, separated from their homeland. And the reason they keep their identity is because of, their strong religious beliefs. So this kind of like forcible separation of the Jewish people from their homeland is what we call a diaspora. And so even though they're kind of forced to, leave their homes, they maintain their culture, their religion, their language, uh, and even to this day they still do. Nowadays, the Jewish people, of course, have many of them have returned to Israel, and they formed the modern day country of Israel. And what we see, one of the major, areas, one of those holiest sites, is this wall called the Western Wall. And this was is considered to be one of the remains of that temple, which is like this ultimate symbol of honoring God. So many Jewish people, even to this day, they come and pray and try to have that connection with their ancient ancestors. All right, so that's it for religions. Thank you for watching. See you next time.